should you buy Ghost of Tsushima in 2021? The release of a giant original IP from PlayStation Studios made by the studio that made the fantastically crafted Infamous series return after a 6-year gap between their last game, Infamous Second Son, and they return with absolute glory. Ghost of Tsushima dials up everything that was known about the talent at Sucker Punch Games and cranks up to the point where Ghost of Tsushima could easily be the most diversified, technical, and well-made game that the studio has ever produced in their long history of creating video game experiences. However, is the game still worth buying, and is the game right for you? In this review, we'll go over the story, gameplay, and open world of this game, all spoiler free. Ghost of Tsushima's story is undoubtedly one of the best aspects of the game and is so damn well written and well executed that the game, without even having to delve into it, is so solid just based on the sole merits of the game's narratival direction and pacing. The game is so story driven and the whole game does revolve around the game's narrative. The game's story is cut up into 3 different acts and focuses on the game's awesome protagonist Jin Sakai, which I've already made a video on in the past, which is in the description, and he's such a well written individual, and his character development as well as the other characters in the game are so intriguing and well executed that the game's story is just propelled by this. Other than the main narrative that is cut into 3 different acts in different regions of the game, there's an anthology of smaller and diversified side quests that support and help build up the main premise of the game's narrative. The game's story is loosely based on that of historical events and is of course using the historical time in which the Mongols tried to invade the Japanese island of Tsushima, but the game uses this time and puts its own well-written but authentic twist on the time to make an absolutely fantastic video game narrative. So you shouldn't come into the game's narrative expecting a properly accurate retelling of history, even though it does that quite well in my personal opinion, but the game's story and setting was all taken from historical events and is purely for entertainment purposes only. Overall, the game's story is so damn memorable and the game is worth its price just for the game's narrative, which is up there with games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Last of Us in my personal opinion. The game is an action-adventure open-world game with combat and stealth elements. It is played in the third-person perspective, and the game features incredibly vast and well-made open-world environments with no waypoints available to you on the game's heads-up display, which, even though it sounds small, is such a subtle detail that just adds to how immersed you are into the world and environments presented to you in Ghost of Tsushima. The game's navigation around its expansive world is simply done by following the direction of wind, and this is such a fantastic detail in addition to the game. Every open world game I've ever played has always had that same and basic level of navigation around its world, with a waypoint marker and a minimap always being visible, meaning that you always had a straight path to wherever you wanted to go. Ghost of Tsushima challenges this convention. Instead, you need to follow the wind to get to your next objective, and sometimes if you get lost or are unsure where you need to go next, it can be a really good thing as you bump into the people of Tsushima or a new side quest or shrine to get yourself invested in, and it's ultimately an amazing addition. Navigation is also mainly done on horseback, and later on in the game you'll also be able to get access to a grappling hook, which is only utilized in areas that are difficult to reach with a normal climbing feature in the game. The open world in this game is beautiful. From the snowy region in which you will fight for Tsushima in a place surrounded by snow, to the beautiful trees and wildlife around the game's awesome forest, the atmosphere in this game has to be one of the best atmospheres ever made in video games. It sets up the stories and characters so much, and it just seamlessly fits into every scenario, and it's just mesmerizing. The vistas and views that you'll see are mind-blowing, and the graphics within the game, even on a base PS4, is stunning, and to me rivals the graphical fidelity of games like Red Dead Redemption 2, with its absolute perfectionate way of paying attention to every little detail within the game's world. There's also a lot of customization options within the game, as you can unlock so many unique and different sets of armor, clothing, and charms within the game. Each of these different sets can be complemented by one another, and the different properties for each of these sets can provide unique benefits within the game as well. Some armor can also help reduce the damage that you take, while another one can increase your total health and melee damage. Most of these different sets can be upgraded by collecting different materials within the game. The crafting and upgrading system isn't that complicated, and is more of just collecting some materials to upgrade certain aspects of your own Jin Sakai to make him the most powerful or most defensive samurai that you can make him. Charms are also a cool addition, are basically items that can be acquired through the means of exploration of the game's awesome open world environment, and they can also give different effects to the general gameplay of the game, such as decreasing your damage taken, reducing enemy detection speed, or how fast you heal after getting wounded. A quick note before I proceed on to the game's combat, which is utterly fantastic. The game also has a really well made free-to-play multiplayer mode as well, called Legends, which was released only late last year. In this new mode within the game, you can complete unique story missions which are all based on Japanese folklore with another player. So if you've got some friends that are also interested in this game, you could get them to play with you as well. In this Legends game mode, there's also a Horde mode in which players will have to fight waves and waves of enemies, which you can do with up to 4 players. A raid was also added into the game as some post-launch content as well. Okay, now back to the game's gameplay. Let's talk about the game's fantastically executed and super fun combat. You can fight the enemies in this game in direct confrontations, which are called standoffs, which are these awesome and well done cinematic entrances into a battle, which you duel a few enemies and slice them down in slow motion if you time your attack at the right time. And this will give you a boost in fighting the rest of the enemies on the battlefield. Players do also have some ranged aspects as well, which is mainly a bow which can fire a few different types of arrows, and you'll probably be utilizing this when fighting lots of enemies at the same time and need to run for a bit and shoot down some enemies with your bow before tackling the rest of the enemies left. Alternatively though, you can also use the game's basic but still fun stealth system, which you can use to evade the enemies and strike them silently, and some tools can be used to make these stealth mechanics even better, as well as some firecrackers to make loud distractions so you can easily take down your foes, or smoke bombs to disorient already alerted foes so you can travel through the smoke produced by the bomb to strike them down. You can also duel some specific enemies within the game in these cinematic arena sequences where you engage with an enemy in one-on-one combat, and these are basically the game's basis for boss fights, and they're some of the best and most well executed video game fights that I've played in a damn while. The main katana combat within the game is divided into different types of fighting styles that you can utilize at any time in combat. The player can switch between these styles called stances at any time in combat. A stance is more effective against different subset of enemies, and it amplifies the attack that you do against that particular enemy. The 4 stances in this game are the stone, water, wind, and moon stances. Firstly, the stone stance is mostly effective against swordsmen, and you can stagger them for a period of time to create an opening for you to attack your foes more efficiently. The water stance, which is most effective against shield men and is the best in breaking their defense, which once again creates an opening for you to attack and strike down your foe. The wind stance, which is effective against spearmen, which can break the really strong offense and defense that these particular enemies have, so you can have a little bit of time to strike them down before they start dealing some serious damage to you. The moon stance, which is effective against the game's brutes, can break their offensive and you can rush in to deal some serious damage to take them down. There's also another stance as well, but I would consider it a spoiler, so I'm not going to mention it in this video. Overall, the game's gameplay aspect is for me on par with the game's incredible narrative, and they both complement each other so much that it ultimately makes the game so damn fantastic. So yes, you should absolutely buy Ghost of Tsushima in 2021. The game has such an incredible cinematic narrative, awesome gameplay and combat, which is some of the best I've played within recent memory, and the open world aspects of the game is just another giant plus that makes the game so damn worth it, even at a hefty price. If you enjoyed this video, let me know down below in the comments, and consider leaving a like on this video. If you bought the game because of this video, let me know as well. Anyway, that's all from me for today's video. Peace.